Okay, so today we're diving deep into negotiation.
Yes, we are.
And, whether you're aiming for that promotion or you're trying to secure some research funding, even just navigating the waters of departmental politics,
Hmm.
negotiation is key in academia.
Yeah, it really is a secret weapon.
It really is a secret weapon, and I think a lot of people don't realize how important it is.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's get into it now. I've got all of your notes here. It looks like we're going to break down some of the core aspects of negotiation. And your notes mentioned there are three big ones.
Yeah, that's right.
What's the first one we should tackle?
Well, I think it all starts with recognizing when you're in a negotiation situation.
Okay.
Because it's not always obvious.
Right.
It can be really subtle.
Yep.
So really it comes down to this: you've got two or more parties involved.
Okay.
There's a conflict of needs or desires,
Uh-huh.
and everyone thinks it can get a better outcome by negotiating rather than just accepting the status quo.
Right. So it's like when you have two labs
Mm.
that are both going after the same grant money.
Exactly.
They both need it, but there's only, one pot.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Or think about a faculty member negotiating their startup package.
Yep.
They want the best resources possible,
Right.
but the department has to, balance everyone's needs.
Right. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So conflict is just kind of baked into that whole process.
Yeah.
But your notes also mention interdependence.
Right.
So how does that work?
Yeah. Interdependence is a key concept because it means that even though your goals might be somewhat in conflict, you're still relying on each other to some degree.
Okay.
So, for example, think about a research collaboration.
Okay.
You might disagree on the specific methods or the direction of the research,
Right.
but ultimately you both need the project to succeed.
Right. So you're in it together.
Exactly.
To some degree, at least.
Yeah.
And that actually reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, this idea of BTNA.
Yes.
Can you remind us what that is and why it matters so much?
Yeah, of course, BTNA stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. And it's essentially your backup plan if the negotiation falls apart.
Okay.
The stronger your BATNA is,
Uh-huh.
the more confident you can be in pushing for what you want.
So like in an academic context, that might mean having another job offer when you're negotiating your starting salary.
Yeah,
How do
there's
you-
some leverage.
Yeah. Or imagine you're trying to get your department to fund a new piece of equipment.
Right.
If you've already submitted a grant proposal that could potentially cover the cost, that strengthens your position significantly.
That's a really good point.
Right.
Okay, so we've got this negotiation situation, this interdependence, and then the importance of having a strong BATNA.
Right.
Now, conflict is obviously inevitable in these situations, so how can academics learn to handle that conflict effectively?
Well, it's important to recognize that conflict isn't inherently a bad thing.
Okay.
It can actually be productive if it's managed well.
Right.
And in academia, conflict can kind of pop up at all these different levels, within yourself, between colleagues, between entire departments even. So like struggling with whether or not to take a new job that would require you to relocate,
Yes.
that would be internal conflict.
Exactly.
But, arguing with a co-author about whose name goes first on a paper,
Right.
that's interpersonal conflict.
Yeah, exactly. And the way you approach each situation is going to vary. But one framework that I found helpful is this thing called the dual concerns model.
Okay.
And it outlines 5 basic approaches to conflict management.
Okay. Love it. Let's get into that toolbox.
All right, so you've got contending, which is, really pushing for your own outcome, even at the expense of others.
Okay.
Then you've got yielding, which is prioritizing the other person's needs above your own.
So like contending might work if you're at an auction or something,
Yeah.
but not so much when you're working on a project with colleagues.
Exactly. And then you have inaction, which is basically avoiding the conflict altogether.
Okay.
And that can be strategic sometimes, but often it just delays the inevitable.
It just kicks the can down the road.
Right, exactly. Then there's problem solving, where you really try to find a win-win solution.
So that sounds like the ideal.
It is in many ways, but it can be challenging.
Of course.
But aiming for those win-win solutions is often the most sustainable approach.
Especially when you're, in it for the long haul with these people.
Especially in academia, where you're building these long-term relationships.
Right.
And then the final one is compromising, which is kind of finding that middle ground
Okay.
where everybody gets something, but maybe not everything they wanted.
So it's like a menu of options.
Exactly.
You have to choose the right one.
Right.
Based on the situation and the relationship.
Exactly. And that's where preparation comes in.
Okay.
Before you even go into a negotiation, you need to define your goals, understand your BATNA research, the other party's position as much as possible.
Right, because going into a negotiation unprepared is like trying to write a grant proposal with no background research.
Exactly. You're just setting yourself up for failure.
Total failure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your goals, you've got your BT&A, you've done your homework on the other side.
Right.
Now,
Now you develop your strategy.
okay.
Are you going to go in with a competitive mindset, or are you going to go for a more collaborative approach?
Okay.
It depends on the situation and your relationship with the other party.
So like negotiating your salary for a new job at academic.jobs.com might be a little bit more competitive.
Yeah, potentially.
Whereas, working out a research project with a colleague would require more collaboration.
Exactly. And once you've got your overall strategy, you can start thinking about tactics.
Okay, so what are tactics?
Tactics are those short-term moves that you make during the negotiation.
Okay.
Try to get what you want.
Okay, so give us some examples.
Okay, so one interesting tactic is forbearance,
Okay.
which is basically being patient and holding back.
So not just like blurting out whatever comes to mind.
Exactly.
Okay.
Sometimes it's good to let the negotiation unfold naturally.
I could see how that would be effective.
Yeah. And another powerful tactic is silence.
Silence.
Yeah, sometimes the best thing you can do is just shut up and listen.
Interesting.
And this can be really effective if the other party is trying to pressure you into making a concession.
Okay, so how would we see that in real life in academia?
Well, imagine you're in a faculty meeting
Okay.
and someone is really pushing hard for a decision you disagree with.
Okay.
Instead of arguing back, you could just remain silent and kind of put the pressure back on them.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got forbearance.
Right.
We've got silence.
Yes.
Any other good ones?
Well, there are lots of different tactics, but not all tactics are created equal.
Right.
Of course,
But,
some are ethical, some are less so.
right. Like good cop, bad cop. Probably not the best.
Probably not the best way to build those long-term relationships.
Right. You brought up hardball tactics earlier.
Yeah.
Are those ever appropriate in academia where relationships are so important?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's a judgment call. Sometimes you might encounter someone who's using those tactics against you, and you need to be prepared to counter them.
Right.
But generally speaking, I'd say it's better to stick with those collaborative approaches whenever possible.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about recognizing negotiation situations, the importance of interdependence and BATNAs, managing that conflict, and even some of these clever tactics.
Yeah, we've made good progress.
So where do we go from here?
Well, next, I think we should dive into those two main approaches to negotiation: distributive bargaining and integrative negotiation.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get into it.
So distributive bargaining, that's often described as, dividing the pie.
Okay.
It's what people typically think of when they hear the word negotiation.
Right.
You've got limited resources and each party is trying to get the biggest slice possible.
So it's a zero-sum game.
That's the classic model, yeah.
Okay.
So think about two departments fighting over limited lab space. Or a faculty member negotiating their teaching load. They want fewer courses. The department needs someone to teach them.
Right. I see the tension there.
Yeah.
So if you're in that situation, how do you play that game effectively?
Well, one key is trying to figure out the other party's resistance point.
Okay.
That's the point at which they'd rather walk away than make any more concessions.
Okay.
So if you can figure out their bottom line, you can push for a better deal for yourself.
It's like playing poker.
It is a little bit like playing poker, yeah.
Trying to read those tells.
Yeah, you're trying to gather information, manage impressions. You want to appear confident and assertive, but without revealing too much about your own weaknesses.
Okay, makes sense. But distributive bargaining sounds kind of intense.
It can be, yeah.
Is there ever a time when it makes sense to shift to a more collaborative approach?
Absolutely, and that's where integrative negotiation comes in.
Okay.
So instead of dividing a fixed pie, you're trying to expand the pie so that everyone benefits. It's about finding creative solutions that address everyone's underlying interests.
So it's more like we're in this together.
Exactly. It's about collaboration, problem solving, building those lasting relationships, which, as you know, is so essential in academia.
Right. You don't want to burn bridges by being too aggressive in a negotiation.
Exactly. You're going to be working with these people for years, potentially.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you make integrative negotiation work?
Well, one of the most important things is to focus on interests rather than positions.
Okay.
So instead of just stating your demands,
Ah.
try to understand why you and the other party want what you want.
So like instead of saying, I need this piece of equipment,
Right.
you would say, my research is hampered because I don't have the ability to do this kind of analysis and I need a way to overcome that.
Exactly. You open up the conversation.
Right.
And by understanding each other's deeper motivations,
Yeah.
you can start to brainstorm creative solutions that might not have been obvious at first.
So it's like getting to the why not just the what.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay. And another key principle of integrative negotiation is to be firm about your own interests, but flexible about how those interests are met.
Okay.
So you know your bottom line,
Uh-huh.
but you're open to exploring different pathways to get there.
So you're willing to compromise, but not on the things that are really essential to you.
Exactly.
And that makes me think about power dynamics.
Right.
How does power play into negotiation, especially in academia, which can be pretty hierarchical?
It's a crucial factor.
Okay.
Power in academia can come from all sorts of places: expertise, position, reputation, social networks.
Okay.
And the way power is used or misused can really make or break a negotiation.
So like a senior faculty member negotiating with a junior colleague
Uh.
obviously has a lot of power just by virtue of their position.
Right.
So how do you make sure that that power isn't being abused or that the negotiation remains fair?
Yeah, that's where awareness is key. I think
Okay.
both parties need to be mindful of the power dynamics at play.
And strive for a process that feels equitable even if there's a clear power differential.
Oh, good.
And sometimes it's helpful to have neutral third parties involved,
Okay.
like a mediator or a departmental committee to ensure fairness.
So power can be used for good or for evil.
Exactly. It can be used to steamroll people or it can be used to facilitate collaboration
Right.
and make sure everyone's voice is heard.
And speaking of voices being heard,
Yeah.
I want to talk about emotions.
Okay.
We've all been in those meetings where things get heated.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you manage emotions effectively in a negotiation, especially when the stakes are high, like they often are in academia?
Well, I think the first step is acknowledging that emotions are always present,
Okay.
even if they're not explicitly stated.
Right.
People come to the table with their own anxieties, aspirations, frustrations.
Mm-hmm.
Pretending that those emotions don't exist just makes things worse.
Right. It's like trying to pretend you can run a marathon without breaking a sweat.
Exactly.
Not going to happen.
So you have to find that balance. You want to create a space where people feel safe to express their concerns,
Okay.
but also where those emotions are channeled constructively towards problem solving.
So it's like, okay, we hear your frustration.
Mhm.
Let's figure out how to address it, not get over it.
Exactly. And sometimes simply acknowledging someone's emotional state can diffuse the tension.
Okay.
You know, saying something like, I understand you're feeling frustrated with how this has been handled in the past can go a long way.
Yeah, it shows you're not dismissing them.
Right.
Now, speaking of, making people feel heard and understood,
Yeah.
trust is a big part of this whole equation.
Absolutely. Trust is the bedrock of successful negotiation, especially in academia.
Right, because if you don't trust the person across the table, you're going to be second-guessing everything they say.
Exactly. You'll be less likely to believe what they're saying, and you'll be less likely to make concessions.
Right, because you're afraid they're going to take advantage of you.
Exactly.
So trust is crucial.
It is.
But how do you build trust in a negotiation?
It takes time and effort, for sure.
All right.
One of the most important things is to be honest and transparent,
Okay.
even when it's difficult.
Now, you're not saying you have to reveal your entire strategy.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But you should be truthful about your core interests and motivations.
Well,
And equally important, you need to follow through on your commitments.
so be a person of your word.
Exactly. If you say you're going to do something, do it. That consistency builds trust over time.
Right. People learn to trust you because you're trustworthy.
Exactly. And another key ingredient in building trust is showing empathy.
All right.
Try to see the situation from the other party's perspective. Even if you don't agree with them, try to understand where they're coming from,
Okay. Yeah.
what their concerns might be.
So it's not just about pushing your own agenda.
Right.
It's about trying to find common ground.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important aspect of negotiation, especially in academia managing relationships.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You're often negotiating with people you have ongoing relationships with, colleagues, mentors, department heads, even students.
Right. It's not just a one-off transaction.
Exactly. So you have to approach those negotiations with a different mindset.
Okay.
It's less about winning and more about finding a solution that works for everyone involved, even if it means making some compromises along the way.
Right, because you might win the battle, but lose the war.
Exactly. You might get what you want in this one negotiation.
Yeah.
But if you damage the relationship in the process, you've ultimately lost something far more valuable.
Right. So how do you do that?
Well, one key is to focus on the long-term relationship
Okay.
rather than the short-term outcome.
So play the long game.
Exactly. Be willing to make concessions that might not be ideal in the moment,
Uh-huh.
but that will preserve the relationship in the long run.
Right. So maybe you don't get everything you want right now,
Right.
but you're building goodwill.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another important strategy is to be mindful of the different types of relationships you have in academia.
Okay.
Some relationships are more transactional,
Right.
like those you might have with vendors or service providers.
Right. So if you're buying a new piece of equipment, you can be a little bit more hard-nosed.
Exactly.
Okay.
But when you're negotiating with colleagues or mentors or students,
Uh-huh.
the relationship itself is often part of what you're negotiating.
That's such a good point.
So you have to be more sensitive to their needs and concerns.
You wouldn't use the same approach with your department chair as you would with the person who delivers your mail.
Exactly. And finally, it's crucial to communicate effectively.
Right.
This means being clear about your needs and expectations, listening to the other party's perspective, and finding ways to work together to resolve disagreements.
Right. Because even in a disagreement, you can still be respectful.
Absolutely.
Show that you value the relationship.
Good communication is key to preventing misunderstandings, building trust, and strengthening those relationships even when you're dealing with difficult issues.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different aspects of negotiation, but I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about multi-party negotiations.
Okay.
These can be really challenging
They can be.
because you've got so many different perspectives and personalities to juggle.
It's like going from checkers to 3D chess.
Right, think about those faculty meetings where everyone's trying to agree on a new curriculum,
Right.
or budget discussions where every program is vying for a bigger slice of the pie.
Yeah, those can be tough.
So how do you navigate those situations effectively?
Well, one of the most important things is to prepare thoroughly.
Okay.
Before you even walk into that meeting,
Uh-huh.
try to anticipate who the key players are,
Okay.
what their positions might be, and where there might be potential for alliances or coalitions.
So it's like doing your homework before a big presentation.
Exactly. You want to know your audience.
Right.
And tailor your message accordingly.
So if you're proposing a new initiative, you might emphasize how it aligns with the department's strategic goals.
Exactly. You want to make your proposal as appealing as possible to the largest number of people.
And would you say it's a good idea to reach out to some potential allies beforehand?
That's a great strategy.
Okay.
There's strength in numbers, especially in multi-party negotiations.
Right.
If you can go into a meeting with a few allies already on board, it gives you a lot more leverage.
Okay, so preparation and coalition building are key.
Yeah.
But what about during the meeting itself?
Right.
How do you make sure things don't devolve into chaos?
Yeah, you've got to have a clear process in place.
Okay.
Whether it's a formal agenda or just some agreed upon ground rules for how the discussion will proceed.
Because if people feel like the process is fair,
Exactly.
then they're more likely to cooperate.
Right. And it's also helpful to have a designated facilitator or moderator,
Right.
someone who can keep the conversation focused and ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak.
So process and facilitation are crucial.
They are.
But it also seems like multi-party negotiations require a different level of communication skill.
Absolutely.
You're not just talking to one person, you're addressing a whole group. So any advice on how to communicate effectively in those situations?
Well, one important thing is to be clear and concise in your communication.
Okay.
Avoid jargon or overly technical language that might alienate some members of the group.
Right. You want to make sure everyone understands what you're talking about.
Exactly. And be mindful of your nonverbal communication as well. Make eye contact with different people around the room, use open body language,
Right.
and try to project a sense of confidence and composure, even if you're feeling nervous.
So be aware of how you're coming across to the whole group.
Exactly. And another key is to be a good listener.
Okay.
Pay attention to what others are saying, even if you don't agree with them.
Uh-huh.
Ask clarifying questions and try to understand their perspectives.
Right. Because even if you don't agree with them, showing that you've heard them
Exactly.
can go a long way.
It can really build trust and help you find common ground.
Okay. So be clear, be concise, be a good listener.
Right.
Anything else?
And remember, multi-party negotiations can be long and complex. So be patient, be persistent, and don't get discouraged if things don't go your way right away.
Don't give up.
Exactly. It's a process, and it often takes time to build consensus and reach a decision that everyone can live with.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the basics of negotiation to the complexities of these multi-party negotiations.
Right.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more crucial topic, negotiation across cultures.
Okay.
Academia is becoming increasingly globalized.
It is.
You've got collaborations happening across continents, faculty members coming from all over the world.
Right.
So how do cultural differences play into the negotiation process?
It's such an important question.
Mhm.
Culture has a huge impact on how people communicate, how they view conflict, what they value in a negotiation.
Right.
And when people from different cultures come together to negotiate, those differences can lead to misunderstandings, frustration, even failed agreements.
Right, because what might be considered polite in one culture
Exactly.
might be seen as rude in another.
It adds a whole other layer of complexity.
It really does.
So it's essential to approach cross-cultural negotiations with a high level of awareness and sensitivity.
Okay.
And it all starts with doing your research.
Okay, so before you even sit down at the table,
Right.
you're doing your homework.
You're hitting the books, learning about the other party's culture,
Yeah.
their communication styles, their values, their norms around conflict.
So it's like preparing for a trip to a foreign country.
It is very much like that.
You want to learn the customs.
You want to know the customs so you don't accidentally offend anyone.
Right, you don't show up wearing the wrong clothes
Exactly.
or bringing the wrong gift.
Right, and it's not just about avoiding faux pas.
Okay.
It's about understanding the deeper cultural values
Uh-huh.
that might be driving the other party's behavior in the negotiation.
So for example, if you're negotiating with someone from a culture that places a high value on group harmony,
Right?
you might need to be more indirect in your communication.
Exactly. And you might need to be patient and allow more time for relationship building before getting down to business.
So research, patient sensitivity,
Yes.
all key.
And flexibility.
Flexibility.
Yeah. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to cross-cultural negotiation.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be adaptable and willing to adjust your style based on what you're observing and learning in the moment.
So you're bringing your toolkit,
Yes.
but you're also ready to improvise.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that cultural differences can manifest in very subtle ways,
Okay.
not just in big, obvious gestures.
Right.
It's about paying attention to those nuances of communication, both verbal and nonverbal.
Right. A slight change in tone of voice could mean something different.
Exactly.
Okay.
So be observant,
Yeah.
ask clarifying questions, and be willing to check your assumptions.
And remember, communication is a two-way street.
Absolutely.
It's not just about you adapting to their culture.
Right.
It's about helping them understand where you're coming from as well.
Exactly. It's about building that cultural bridge, creating a space where both parties feel understood and respected, even if they come from different backgrounds.
And when you can do that, it just opens up so many more opportunities for collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For innovation, for mutual benefit.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different facets of negotiation,
We have.
but I want to circle back to something we mentioned earlier, agents.
Okay.
I know it's not something that every academic needs,
Right.
but in certain situations, like negotiating a book deal,
Right.
having an agent can make a huge difference.
It can.
So for someone who's never worked with an agent before,
Yeah.
how do they even know if they need one?
That's a great question. You know, agents aren't as common in academia as they are in, say, the entertainment industry.
Right.
But in certain situations, they can be incredibly valuable,
Okay.
especially for academics who aren't comfortable with the negotiation process or who are dealing with these high-stakes deals.
So like negotiating a book contract with a major publisher?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you know if you need an agent? Well, a good rule of thumb is to ask yourself, do I feel confident and comfortable handling this negotiation on my own?
Okay.
If the answer is no, or if you're dealing with a complex deal with a lot of legal and financial implications,
Uh-huh.
then an agent might be a good investment.
Okay, so let's say you've decided you do need an agent.
Okay.
How do you go about finding one?
Well, it can be a bit of a mystery, especially if you've never done it before.
Right.
But there are a few good places to start. One is to ask colleagues for recommendations.
Okay.
If you know someone who's published a book or negotiated a similar deal,
Yeah.
they might be able to point you in the right direction.
Word of mouth is always a good way to find someone.
Absolutely. Another option is to check with professional organizations in your field.
Okay.
Many academic societies have lists of recommended agents or resources for finding agents.
Okay.
And of course, you can always do an online search, but be sure to vet any agents you find carefully before signing any contracts.
Okay, so vetting is key.
It is.
What are some red flags to watch out for?
Well, one red flag is an agent who pressures you to sign a contract
Okay,
before you've had a chance to fully understand the terms.
okay,
Another red flag is an agent who doesn't seem to understand your work or your goals.
okay.
And of course, you want to make sure the agent has a good track record of success
Right.
in negotiating deals similar to yours.
You're entrusting them with your intellectual property and your future.
It's a big decision.
Yeah.
And one more thing to keep in mind, agents typically work on commission,
Okay.
which means they take a percentage of whatever deal they negotiate for you.
Uh-huh.
So make sure you understand their fee structure up front.
Okay, so no surprises down the road.
Exactly.
So finding a good agent is like finding a good partner in any other aspect of your academic career.
It really is.
It's about finding someone you trust,
Right.
someone who understands your work,
Yeah,
and someone who has your best interests at heart.
exactly. And when you find that right fit, it can be a game changer.
Yeah.
A good agent can help you navigate the complexities of the publishing world, advocate for your rights,
Okay.
and ultimately get a better deal than you might have been able to negotiate on your own.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the basics of negotiation
Right.
to the intricacies of cross-cultural negotiation
Yeah.
and working with agents.
Yeah.
But I want to end on a note of encouragement.
Okay.
For our listeners, negotiation can feel intimidating,
It can?
especially if you're new to it or if
Yeah.
you don't see yourself as a naturally assertive person.
Right. A lot of academics feel uncomfortable with the idea of negotiation.
Yeah.
They see it as confrontational or manipulative,
Right. Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it really doesn't, because at its core, negotiation is really about communication,
Yes,
problem solving, and finding creative solutions that benefit everyone involved.
exactly. And those are skills that any academic can develop
Yeah.
with practice and the right mindset.
Right. And the more you practice, the more confident you become.
Yeah.
And that confidence will open up all sorts of opportunities for you, both professionally and personally.
Absolutely.
So the takeaway message is, don't be afraid to negotiate.
Yes.
Whether you're going for that promotion, applying for a grant, or even just trying to get your kids to eat their vegetables.
Exactly.
Negotiation is a valuable life skill
It is.
that can help you achieve your goals and create a more fulfilling life.
Well said.
And if you're an academic looking for a new opportunity to put those negotiation skills to the test,
Yes.
don't forget to check out academic.jobs.com.
Of course.
It's a fantastic resource
It is.
for finding all sorts of higher education jobs,
That's right.
from faculty positions to research roles to administrative positions.
Absolutely.
And having a great job offer in hand is a pretty good way to strengthen your BATNA.
It is a good BATNA.
Right.
Yeah.
So whether you're just starting your academic career or you're a seasoned professional looking for a new challenge,
Yeah.
academic.jobs.com is definitely worth checking out. So there you have it, our deep dive into negotiation for academics.
Yes.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
but hopefully you've come away with some valuable insights
I hope so.
and practical tips that you can apply in your own academic journey.
Absolutely.
Remember, negotiation is a skill that anyone can develop with practice and the right mindset.
That's right.
So don't be afraid to step up to that negotiating table
Right.
and advocate for yourself and your ideas.
That's the key.
Good luck out there.
Good luck.
So we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive into negotiation. We've talked about everything from distributive bargaining to integrative negotiation, from managing conflict to building trust.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
It has.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one last piece of the puzzle I want to explore before we wrap things up.
Okay, what's that?
It's about putting these skills into practice in the real world of academia.
Yeah.
We've talked about all these hypothetical scenarios, but how do these concepts actually play out in those real-life situations?
Right, where the stakes are high. And the personalities can be a little challenging.
Let's just say unique.
Unique, yeah.
So let's get specific. What are some common negotiation scenarios that academics might find themselves in?
Well, one that comes up all the time is negotiating for resources.
Resources.
This could be anything from lab space and equipment to teaching assistants, research funding.
Yeah,
It's a constant battle in academia,
it really is, especially these days.
especially these days with tight budgets.
Right, so how do you make a compelling case for why your project deserves a bigger slice of that pie?
Well, I think one key is to do your homework.
Okay.
Before you even step into that meeting with the department chair or the dean, Make sure you understand the budget process, the criteria they use to allocate resources, the overall financial health of the institution.
So you're not just going in there and saying, give me $1 million.
Exactly. You want to come prepared
Right?
with
Yeah.
a well-researched proposal
Yeah, I go.
that shows why your project is a wise investment
Right.
for the institution as a whole.
And probably helps to highlight the potential benefits of the project.
Absolutely.
Right? How will it advance knowledge in your field? How will it enhance the institution's reputation? How will it benefit students?
All of that, you want to paint a compelling picture of what success looks like and make it clear that your project is worth investing in.
Okay, so be prepared, know your stuff, make that case.
Yeah, and remember, negotiation is a two-way street.
Uh-huh.
Be prepared to compromise.
Of course.
Be creative in finding solutions.
Okay, so resource negotiation is a big one.
It is.
What are some other common negotiation scenarios that academics might face?
Well, another big one is negotiating teaching assignments.
Teaching assignments.
Okay. This can be tricky because it involves balancing individual preferences with departmental needs and student demand.
Right, because everyone has their favorite courses to teach and the ones they really don't want to teach.
Exactly. And there are always those courses that are essential for the curriculum, but that nobody wants to teach.
Right.
So when you're negotiating for teaching assignments, it's important to be upfront about your preferences,
Okay.
but also to be flexible and willing to compromise.
Right.
If you absolutely refuse to teach a particular course, it's helpful to explain why
Okay.
and offer alternative solutions.
So instead of just saying, no way,
Right.
you might say, I'm not as comfortable with this one because it's outside my area of expertise,
Yeah,
but I'd be happy to teach this other course that aligns more closely with my research.
exactly. And it's also helpful to highlight your strengths and how they could benefit students.
Oh, yeah?
If you're passionate about a particular pedagogical approach, or if you have experience teaching a particular type of student, make sure you mention that.
Right, because ultimately you're trying to create the best possible learning experience for students.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And remember, negotiation is an ongoing process. It's not just about that one meeting where you're assigned your courses for the next semester.
Right.
It's about building relationships with your colleagues, staying informed about departmental needs, and being proactive in advocating for yourself and your teaching goals.
Okay, so resource negotiation, teaching assignments. Any other scenarios that come to mind?
Well, another one that's particularly relevant for early career academics is negotiating your startup package.
Ah, the startup package.
Yeah, when you're first hired.
That can be really exciting.
It can be, but it can also be nerve-wracking.
Right, because it's not just about the salary.
Right.
It's about all the resources that you need to get your research program off the ground.
Exactly. Lab space equipment, travel funding, research assistance.
Right, all of that.
So it's important to go into those negotiations prepared and to know your worth.
Okay.
Do your research on what similar institutions are offering, and don't be afraid to ask for what you need to be successful.
Don't be shy.
And remember, everything is negotiable.
Right, so even if the initial offer isn't ideal,
Right.
don't just take it at face value.
See it as a starting point for a conversation. And be creative in finding solutions that work for both parties. Maybe you can't get everything on your wish list,
Right.
but maybe there are other perks or benefits the institution can offer.
Reduce teaching load or something?
Exactly, like a reduced teaching load in your first year or support for attending conferences.
Okay, so those are some specific scenarios where negotiation skills are crucial.
Yeah.
But it strikes me that negotiation is also part of that broader academic culture,
It really is.
even in those everyday interactions.
It's woven into the fabric of academic life.
Right. It's about advocating for your ideas,
Yes.
building consensus, finding ways to work together, even when there are disagreements.
Exactly, because academia is all about collaboration and intellectual exchange.
Right.
But it's also a highly competitive environment.
It is.
So you need to be able to navigate those dynamics skillfully and ethically.
And that's where all these principles of negotiation come in. They can help you build those relationships. Advocate for yourself effectively and ultimately achieve your goals while maintaining your integrity.
Right.
Okay, so anyone out there who's ready to take their negotiation skills to the next level
Yes.
and find a new opportunity
Right.
in this exciting world of higher education.
Definitely check out academic.jobs.com.
There you go.
It's a fantastic resource for exploring all sorts of job openings, from faculty positions
Yeah.
to research roles to administrative positions.
Right, and having a great job offer in hand can really strengthen your BATNA.
It's a good BAT in it.
It is.
Yeah.
So there you have it, our deep dive into negotiation for academics.
We did it.
We did it. We covered a lot of ground today.
We did.
But hopefully you came away with some valuable insights and practical tips
I hope so.
that you can use on your own academic journey.
Absolutely.
And remember, negotiation is a skill that you can develop with practice and the right mindset.
It is.
So don't be afraid to step up to that negotiating table. Advocate for yourself and your ideas. Good luck out there.
Good luck out